Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Hi everybody, talofa lava and kia ora from here in New Zealand. This is Sarah Webster and I'm here to talk to you about designing the dream, which is all about using the design process with the community to engage them in moving to MLE and MLP. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to you through briefly something that I've tried with community members, in particular parents of a team, to engage them in a part of our program which we call Chill in the Morning. Chill in the Morning is all about children independently leading their learning, and it would happen as soon as the children came in until about quarter and we would all get together. We had a few issues with parents around their engagement due to them not understanding what was needed to happen at that time in the morning. They didn't feel that they were prepared. They didn't feel that they had enough input into what was happening, and they were very insecure about their own abilities to ask good questions and support their children with learning. So my goal was to work with them to develop this, to engage them, to talk about community being involved in our program. Now, what I'm going to do is going to take you through just a brief few slides that will talk to you about what it is that the program was all about. And then we're going to talk about how you could possibly do this in your practice. So just bear with me while I put it onto screen. Right, so here we go. Designing the dream, engaging with the community and talking to community to develop relationships and programs. E hara taku toa I te toa taki tahi engari he toa takihinti. And it's all about our achievement, and it's not ours of alone. It's all about how we can develop relationships to increase engagement and ensure that the success that our children have is the success of not just them, but the whole of their family. So just some questions to start off with. To what extent have you investigated what your community wants and needs when it comes to moving into an MLE or MLP environment? And how might this enhance students' learning? To what extent have you implemented strategies to inform and consult with the wider community about the impact of MLE and MLP? And to what extent do you actively seek support, advice, guidance and expertise from parents, family and whānau, wider community agencies and industry? Now they're quite big questions. When we're beginning our journey into MLP and MLE, we can get quite often caught up into what we think is best for the children, and we forget that actually the community is the bigger part of what the children belong to. It's their present, it's their future. They need to have as much say into what's going to happen for their children as we would, as well as the children. And the reason being for this is they bring a whole other level of expertise that we may not necessarily possess ourselves. They also bring hopes and dreams for their children that we necessarily might not have access to. We can see it from our point of view, but we may not always see it from where they're at. And also, we need to think about how we can make the school a community learning hub. So a hub for learning, a place where children are engaged, community members are engaged. It shouldn't be a place where we are just imparting information to children. It should be a whole array of osmosis and symbiotic learning, sharing expertise, and moving forward together. Now, I did a little bit of research into how to engage the community. And what I came up with was this research by Stephen Covey, who in 2008 points out that home is the child's first school and place of education. We sometimes forget as practitioners that in those years before they come to school, the amount of learning that the children are doing is immense. And we can get caught up on what we think they need to know as opposed to what is relevant to their everyday life. Other research has proven that parental involvement has a significant positive effect on children's achievement and adjustment. And this has also been extended to the point of saying that it's not just at early years basis, and not from going from early childhood to primary level, but further up the school too. So the amount of engagement parents have and involvement from day one has a positive impact on future of children's education. Now, MAP carried out a research project in America that was to do with parent involvement and intervention. And the reason he did it was because he wanted to engage the community. And the problem was that most of the parents felt inadequate. They didn't know how to support their children, but they wanted to support the children and they wanted the children to succeed. So he developed a program in which the learners were also the adults, so the adults could be supported. There was a lot of homeschool partnerships to develop parents' confidence and understanding of what has been expected of them. And from there, they moved on. And what they found was that research was a great asset when it came to developing children's engagement as well as achievement in school. So back to my research. So when I started looking at engaging the community, we had already set in place a program, as I talked about earlier, called Chill in the Morning. And what used to happen was that we would have this group of parents that would come in. They would stand at the door. They would gossip. They would talk. And then they would leave. There was no engagement with their children. There was no engagement with other adults other than their social group. So we just left it at that. And this was a big puzzle for me. And my big thing is about how do I get them involved? So last year I spent a year looking at how I could do that. And having been at an Emerging Leaders Summit where I listened to Karen talk about using the design process, I thought this would be a great opportunity. So step one in using the design process is I had to create a parent focus group. And I did this through a few series of steps. So the first thing I did was contact parents in forms of emails and through getting them in for informal breakfasts where I'd give them an insight into MLE and what that meant for us. Also gave them a bit of a snapshot into the program. And from there, after a few of these sessions of just people having a bit of a mingle and feeling okay to ask questions about the program, I sent out a survey that actually engaged with the parents and enabled them to tell me what it was that they loved about the program, what they thought the kids loved about it, what they didn't understand, and what they thought their role was. This information was really insightful. They felt that they didn't have a role. The majority of them felt that their kids were engaged but weren't sure of the impact it was having on their learning, and they weren't sure what questions to ask, and they weren't sure as to what they could do at home to support it. So from this, I then sent out further feelers, and I left it as being a voluntary thing. So I said to a group of said to the parents, I'm looking to develop Chill in the Morning. I need your support. Would you be willing to let me know if you're willing to be part of it? So out of we had 60 children at the end of last year, and we had 6 parents that decided to be part of this program. And what they did from that, looked at how it helped me to see where they were coming from. So we had several meetings, and the first one was where I empathized. So always for the first stage, and the design process I used was based on the design school of Stanford. So I used their model. So the first thing I had to do was to empathize with the parents. And by doing that, I had to ensure that I didn't put in any of my feelings. I didn't have to put in any of my concerns, any of my understandings or my beliefs. I had to sit and listen. So when I was sitting and listening, I got a lot of information. I asked them to share me their understandings of the program. I asked them to share their concerns, and I asked them to think about what they needed to move forward. And as many teachers know, sitting and listening can be quite tricky. We're used to talking all the time, so sitting and listening is quite tricky. So I was able to talk with these parents, and I got a great overview, and I said at the end of it, so after you empathize, you have to summarize what they've said, come up with some possible ideas, and then feedback. So the general consensus was that they didn't know what questions to ask. They weren't sure where things were in the room. It wasn't clear, and it wasn't clear who was doing what. And they were a bit worried that their children would get lost. They wanted to know what was coming up so that they could support. So what we did is on that day, we came up with 3 ideas that we would implement before our next meeting. So after a bit of negotiation and designing, where the first idea was around having the adults clearly visible and identifiable. So we have one meet and greet teacher who stands at the front of the house and shares, says hello to everybody that come in. They're the first port of call for parents and for children, and they don't move from that spot. The other 2 teachers are clearly identified as being the people that are roving, or as we call them, the floating fairies. We are a junior school. And what that means is they have some wings on, and they go around the room and engaging with children. As soon as we put that into place, there was already a drastic change in what was happening in our program. Parents knew who it was they could go and talk to, and they knew who was there to help support the children. The second thing that we put into place was a clearly identifiable plan. And by this, what I mean is that we decided designated activities. So, for example, all those activities that were about investigating had a green colored tag on them, and they were in one end of the room. All the ones that are about creating had the yellow colored tag on them, and they were in the messy area of the room. All the ones that are about making connections and evaluating had a blue color tag on it, and were in the opposite end of the room. And the final one was leading your learning, which was a red color tag, and that was allowed to happen anywhere. So the floor plan for our space was emailed to parents, and they found that really useful because they could see where they needed to go to do different activities. The children had already worked it out, but it was more for the parents, so that worked really well. And the third thing that they wanted was being able to ask the questions, giving a heads up as what's happening. So we then implemented the ensuring that we sent the copy of the plan of what activities would be out the weekend before they were going to happen, so that parents could see what was coming up. And that means that they could ask questions beforehand, they could ask questions during or after. It was entirely up to them. So once we've done that, we put that into place for probably 6 weeks, nearly 8, so it was almost a whole term. We then got back together with this parent focus group. So we'd already been through the design process of empathizing, identifying the problem, thinking about some ideas to solve that problem, and implementing them. So now we had to evaluate the problem, and if we successfully managed to implement those changes. And what we found was yes, but there was a next step. So as with everything, this was an evolving process. So the next step for us was to tackle the issue around parents' understanding of the program and engaging them in the program. So I put this to the floor to the parents and said, what would you put in place to engage other parents like yourself? What would you come to? And from together we worked out some ideas. I got them to put some ideas down each, and then we kind of put them together and made a workable model. So the first idea that they had was around more morning breakfasts, but where the parents can be the children and be exposed to the sessions. And the other one was to make sure that we gave them insight into our inquiry. Now, as our Children Morning program is based around our inquiry, this was something I hadn't thought about before, but we were going to do the tuning in activity with the parents before we did it with the children. From this, what we did was they were starting to be the mouthpiece for the community, if you like. They were the ones that were going to go and expose it to other members of our team parenting unit and talk to other parents that they knew. And it was kind of a bit of a pay it forward type of strategy. So you bring a friend, you tell a friend, and so on. It was about putting that responsibility back into their hands, and also that power to feel that they're important and to be involved in it is extremely powerful, and is what makes it successful. So we had 2 sessions. We had one which was all about the parents coming in, and we called it PIL. So it was the parents' version of CHILL, which is parents independently learning. And what we did was do a role reversal. So we had the children we'd chosen some children who were quite happy to be involved, and they became the children, the teachers. They put it on the wings. They were the meet and greet. They were holding workshops. Parents came in and they had exactly the same activities that children would, and we got them to play. The benefit of playing is immense. And from all that, we then got feedback as to what worked and what else we can do with it. And what was really exciting is that they were starting to let down their barriers because it was a safe environment. The second one was the inquiry evening, and we had a Bethmetia. And part of the inquiry that we were doing was about creating your own country. So we gave the parents, we had an evening, and we gave the parents the same activity with the kids for tuning in. And we said, can you create your own country? Hence Bethmetia. And then you've got to be able to discuss it. So you give them a set amount of time, they create, we gave them other resources they could use, and then they share. What was really interesting is that them putting themselves into their children's shoes, and you could see the ones that felt apprehensive about getting it wrong or doing the wrong thing, whereas others were really engaged in it. After that, we only had a handful really turn up for that. I would say we'd had about 6 parents. And what we said was, okay, so now, having done that activity, what would you say you want your children to be during this inquiry unit? What would you want them to do? And what do you want them to understand? We've never done that before. as a staff, we've never involved parents in the early stages of planning or inquiry. But what was really magical for me, because they were saying what their children wanted to do, be, and understand, their engagement, the Children in the Morning program had heightened. It had become more powerful, and it had become so much more extreme that it was going to have a great effect. And from that, we talked about getting other people involved, and that was where we talked again about paying it forward. So we said, right, okay, every term we're going to do this, and your goal is to bring a new friend along each term, which is great. We then talked about what we could do in the mornings, and they gave some more ideas. So this came back to another group session with my parent focus group, and we did another evaluation. So the great thing about the design process is you keep going around the cycles, but like teaching is an inquiry, but it's all about putting yourself in the shoes of your audience. So in this case, it was about putting ourselves in the shoes of the community, of parents in particular, and engaging them. And our product that we were selling was our program and the ability for them to be engaged with their children's education. So we got back together and discussed that, and we said, what next? So we came up with a strategy, and at this point we were coming towards the end of the year, so there wasn't much space to continue to develop the program. However, what we did is come up with some next steps for the next year. And what we identified as the next step for that, and the thing that we needed to harness now, was about getting those new parents into school feeling as secure in the program as everybody else. I should really mention that nowadays, when you walk into our space, you don't see parents having a gossip. You see parents sitting with children, not always their own children, and having conversations. And I have parents coming up to me and saying, you know what? I wish I could stay around this morning because I want to learn this thing. And we have parents saying, did you know that so-and-so came home last night and told me all these amazing things that I didn't even think they would know about. I know about the design process. I never knew about that. I know about prototyping. I never knew about that. I've just learned how to do a great science experiment. And they're wanting to engage with them home. So this excitement is the passion that we want to drive. We're not expecting our parents to be the teachers. We're not expecting them to teach them the skills for reading and writing and maths. What we're trying to do is ignite that passion for education and learning. So now the goal this year has been about transitioning new parents, so that we have put in place a new brochure around it, a bit of a film that the children have made, and our parents buddy up with new parents so that it makes it happen. So in summary, what I'm trying to say is that to engage your community, you need to put yourself in their shoes. You need to take your teacher hat off for a minute, and you need to become an active listener. Using the design process is a great way to do that. We used it for one element of our program, but in retrospect, when we were going through our changes into MLE and MLP, it would have been a great way to start that process with parents. Having that engagement from day one would make the transition so much easier. And what you're doing is you're empowering your community. You're also making connections with your community, and you're being respectful of your community, which at the end of the day, your school is your heart of your community, what should be happening. I'll just briefly take you through the steps of the design process again, and then my challenge to you is to go and implement it. Go and put it into place, try it, talk to your parents, have conversations, enjoy being with them, have a bit of fun. It's all about the fun and engagement. So step one for us was about empathy and immersion, and that was all about getting the idea. What is the problem, identifying it, and making sure you fully understand where they're coming from. Number two is putting together some ideas. So for us, it was doing it in small steps. Number three is implementing those ideas, or refining if you need to, because that can be quite often this case. Not everything happens first time. And finally, you evaluate. And what you find quite often not is you've got something else, the next step. And that's great, because that means that you're making progress, and the implemented changes you're making will be sustainable. So give it a go. Design the dream. Make learning happen for both your children, parents, teachers, and your community. Make school the learning heart of your community. And start using the design process with parents more often. Thank you for listening. It was great to be able to share my experiences with you. Tēnā koutou katoa, and I will be definitely tapping into more workshops in Connected Ed Month. See you later. Bye.